Welcome back to San Diego People as we talk about getting ready for a disaster, most notably a possible fire disaster. To my immediate right is Ron Lane, the director of the Office of Emergency Services, and with him is Sue Carter, who's from Volunteer San Diego. These are the people who will step in to help when it happens. We already talked about the fact it's not a matter of if. Sue, who do you have standing by to help if a fire breaks out and people get evacuated?
We are actually responsible for coordinating the spontaneous unaffiliated volunteers, so those people who want to help in the case of a fire but aren't affiliated with an organization like the Red Cross or the Salvation Army. So all of those folks are referred to Volunteer San Diego, and we put them in a database so they can be deployed as they are needed. Give me an example of even from going from the last 2007 fires, the kind of things that happened. One of the greatest needs was for call operators at 211 San Diego. So we actually referred about 1,200 people to help field the calls coming in to 211. So they were taking all of the calls about where do I evacuate, how do I evacuate, what do I do with my pets. And the volunteers were a huge need for that service in particular. How did they get their information? Somebody comes from Allied Gardens who's not threatened by the fire, and they call you up and they say, I want to help. How do I help? You bring them down and say, here's the call center. How do they go to work? They would register with Volunteer San Diego, and they could actually sign up for the volunteer opportunity right on our website. And then 211 would contact them, bring them in for orientation, and do all the training there in their offices so that they could be familiar with how to answer a call, where to get the information, where to send people for more resources. It's better to do that now than wait until the next disaster breaks out. You'd like to hear from people, right? We would. There are needs all year round in disaster and outside of disaster, and the more affiliated volunteers we have, whether it's with a CERT team or with a nonprofit volunteer disaster response, the better. That's something. And Ron Lane from the Office of Emergency Services, you fit into this whole thing because you have Augie and his people out there on the front lines. Sue and her people are in the back rooms answering the phones. And what are you folks doing at the emergency center once it opens up? Well, we open up the Office of Emergency Services, our Emergency Operations Center, and we coordinate the regional response. So we have incident commanders out there managing the fires, but we're the ones who coordinate all the different agencies. As you can probably appreciate, managing a disaster is extremely complex, and we have all representatives from all the key agencies, Red Cross, Sheriff's Department, medical examiner, animal control, hospitals, all in our EOC. And so when we decide to evacuate a community or make a decision, all those agencies are immediately involved in that process, so we can get a quick process of getting the right people to the right place at the right time. Who makes the decision that it's time to open up the emergency operations center? That is my decision. And what are the criteria? What's the threshold? The threshold really is if one of the cities opens up their emergency operations center, so we support them. Or if there is a disaster or an event that requires additional assistance beyond the capability of an individual city or non-routine operation, then we will can open up our emergency operations center, and then we can escalate based upon the size of the disaster to a full operation or to a partial operation. Let's go to each of you and find out what you learned from 2007. We know that we learned a lot in 2003 about communications. It improved a lot in 2007. But what did you learn, Augie Gio, in the firefighting effort of the next big wildfire that breaks out when the winds are whipping at 70 miles an hour and the flames are jumping over homes? What will happen differently next time?
We not so much learned, but we validated what we already knew from the 2003 fire, and that allowed us to take action on it now. One of the key elements that we learned, Paul, is that people really need to do a better job of preparing themselves, their properties, their families, in what to do to get ready, to get set, and leave early in defense of their lives. So that was the whole advent for this Before the Threat campaign that one of our people, one of your former people, Leonard Villarreal, actually started with Farmers Insurance. We wanted to contact County OES because we wanted to make this a global, regional issue that public education, public preparedness, before the threat of the disaster is the #1 thing we can do as emergency services organizations. There will never be enough of us to do the job, so we have to really include the citizens themselves to take care of themselves during these catastrophic disasters like wildfires, which we see more or less every year.
And Sue, what about your groups? What did you learn from the last time in terms of getting ready?
So many people called us and said, how can I help? And there weren't necessarily a lot of opportunities for someone who wasn't trained as a volunteer to respond. So we've been encouraging people to affiliate with an organization so they can be trained and ready to deploy. The other thing that we learned was how critical it is to have these job descriptions, these volunteer job descriptions, available and ready so that we can just turn those on, post them on our website, and get people deployed for those most immediate needs. So we've worked with other nonprofits, civic groups, and government agencies so that we have the volunteer positions ready to go when they're needed.
It keeps advancing by leaps and bounds. You know, I've been an observer of all this now for years and years, but we keep getting better at what we're doing. What about at OES?
Yeah. The one thing that really struck me about the 2007 wildfires was the fact that disaster response was truly a community effort. I mean, we the first responders, and we had 25,000 first responders out there doing what they could. But the real success stories was when individual citizens helping neighbor. We saw people who, as they evacuated, making sure that their neighbors also were woken up in the middle of the night and help them out, or people with special needs and the elderly. And businesses stepped in where we fell short and government fell short. Churches opened up their doors to take in evacuees. So wherever we had gaps in the government response, it seemed like our citizens in San Diego stepped up wherever it was needed. And that was very impressive, and that was really a key element in why San Diego is such a robust community that's taking care of its own.
Qualcomm Stadium was Exhibit A, I thought, because people just naturally gravitated to Qualcomm and began setting up their own systems long before the Red Cross got there and disaster services got there. People were already pulling into the Qualcomm lot. They had been told that that was a possible safe haven. And wasn't it interesting how they really organized themselves? And that by the time the relief workers got there to help out even more, and the people who were there were already helping somebody else.
Right. When we opened up the mega shelter at Qualcomm Stadium, we were very concerned because the last mega shelter opened up in the country was in New Orleans.
The Superdome.
Yeah, and we saw what happened there. And it was such a relief to have such an outpouring. I mean, we were told, like USD students, because their classes had been canceled because of fires, thousands of them or hundreds of them came down to Qualcomm to help out, and that happened throughout the community.
Mm-hmm. Make an observation. In an earthquake, people are told that they have to be able to subsist for up to 72 hours or more in their own homes, mostly. People have to learn to get their neighborhoods together and clutch in like that, whereas in a brush fire, you have to grab what you can grab on a skid pack if you can, get it in your trunk and get out of there and move all of a sudden. There's a huge difference, isn't there, in the understanding and the preparedness for a disaster like that?
Well, it really is, and as we saw in the 2003 and 2007 fires, that 3 days is a minimum amount of time. People really need to be prepared for more to that 5 to 7 day period, because you're going to be evacuated for a period of time before law enforcement and the Unified Command System can say it's safe to go in. We're not going to have a reburn into that area. So that's really part of the intent of this whole Before the Threat campaign with Farmers Insurance and County OAS and Volunteer San Diego, is to give people that information so they can develop their disaster plan, they can get their evacuation plan going, they can put their clothes, their food supply, their water supply together, be ready, get set, and go in a timely manner. That's what saved lives, along with preparing your property with that defensible space.
And the fact is, we don't know when the fire is going to be. I mean, you got to get ready this weekend, really, and be ready.
You should be ready now.
And in here is a list of the things you should pack, the things, your prescription medications, all the things they talk about. But you can't be fumbling around, because our reporters were all out in those areas where they were evacuating neighborhoods fast, and people were loading up their cars, sometimes with the strangest things. But you got to decide what stays and what goes.
Well, there's bigger things to this too. We have a lot in the unincorporated area of the county, people that own large animals. So how do you prepare for evacuation of those large animals? And another piece that really paid off in partnership with Farmers Insurance on this is, okay, now that you've evacuated and the fire or the disaster has gone through, how do you recover? How do you ensure that you can recuperate your losses with your insurance agency or agencies? And that's also in this package. So it's not just the preparation in planning for the response and during the response, but it's also the recovery side that Ron and I had talked about over a year ago, bringing to a county-wide level on training.
Well, we're glad you're all prepared. I will tell people again, Sue Carter is with Volunteer San Diego. People can find you on the website at Volunteer San Diego and sign up now and list their skills and find out something they can do if they're needed. And Ron, we know you're ready. It's just a case of when you when you pull the string and everything goes up again and we all start covering you again. We're going to take a break here on San Diego People. We will come back with some of the big iron that's ready to go fight the fires. We'll go out in the parking lot and take a look at one of the new rural fire engines that's just standing by, ready to go fight a fire. Stay with us.